let's talk about functions. Now, a function is a relationship where each input has exactly one output. And if the input has more than one output, we would call it a relation. But in this class, mostly we're going to be talking about functions, though we'll see relations pop up here and there. Now, what's an example of a function? Well, a function can be anything where you take one group of things and you relate it to another. For example, what if we said our function was favorite drink? Okay, so this is my function. And let's say that, so we're going to take a group of people and apply this function favorite drink, and on the other side will be those people's favorite drinks. So over here, here's our people. So this is people. And out over here, we'll have our drink. Sure. So, for example, my favorite drink is sweet tea. No doubt about it. Not too sweet, but sweet tea hits me just right. Okay, now my wife, Mrs. Dussault, her favorite drink is also sweet tea. We're compatible in that, thankfully. I think I like it a little bit sweeter than she does, but we're not going to get into semantics here. Now, my friend and neighbor, well, his name's Aaron. His favorite drink, without a doubt, is coffee. And my mom, her favorite drink, also without a doubt, is Dr. Pepper. And maybe we can get one more in here. My best friend, Chris, his favorite drink is also Dr. Pepper. Or at least it was when we were growing up. Now it might be sweet tea. I don't know. That just happens when you get older. So, okay. So now let's look at, I'm going to do what we call mapping. I'm going to use the function to map my people onto my drinks. So Mr. Dussault, his favorite drink is sweet tea. Let's add an arrow there just so we can see it going from one direction to the other. My wife, her favorite drink is also sweet tea. Aaron's favorite drink is coffee. My mom's favorite drink is Dr. Pepper, and Chris's drink is also, his favorite drink is also Dr. Pepper. Okay, so now we have a function, right? We have our function, which is a relationship which matched our inputs to exactly one output, because while we might prefer different drinks at different times, we would all say we have one favorite drink. So what we did was we mapped our inputs, so over here I have my inputs to our outputs. Maybe just, I'm going to leave that as singular. So over here, this is my input, and out here, this is my output. My input, into the function, you put Mr. Dussault in, and out pops sweet tea, right? That's through this particular function. Now, we could have done favorite sport, or, I don't know, favorite city, place of birth. All of these things are all functions. And again, if I had more than one arrow coming from myself, then it would no longer be a function, it'd be a relation. Now, another thing to think about is that, and maybe you've heard this before, my input, this is also what we call the domain. And a lot of times you'll see the domain represented by the letter X. While my outputs, well, that's range, or the letter Y. So we've got our inputs, our domain, right? And they go through the function and end up in the range or the output. Okay, now, this is maybe different than what you've seen in the past and what you've seen functions represented as. So how else can we represent functions? Well, how else, I guess, could this be represented? Well, this particular way of mapping functions, I guess, is called a mapping diagram. So if I can, my arrow disappeared on me, that's okay. So here, yeah, this is a mapping diagram, and what that means is basically I've got one block of things, my inputs over here, and then I have my outputs over here. You'll see it kind of like that a lot. Maybe we'll expand this rectangle to include the arrows. So that's a mapping diagram right there, where you have a set of things mapped onto another one. This is probably my favorite representation of a function. I think it just works the best and is the least confusing. What are some other representations? Well, you could have an ordered pair. So maybe we can... So you could have an ordered pair, or ordered pairs is another way to think about this. And you've probably seen this in the past as like x comma y, right? So ordered pairs. Now the ordered pairs for this would be like, you know, Mr. Dussold, comma, sweet tea. And then, you know, you'd also have Mrs. Dussold and sweet tea. Right? Aaron is matched up with coffee. My mom really likes Dr. Pepper. And so does my friend Chris. So that would be using ordered pairs to talk about this mapping diagram. Now, this is gonna look might look a little crazy. We'll just see. Kind of gonna move those down there a little bit. And then we can fill in that. Great. So, ordered pairs, that's one way to go about it. Another way to talk about functions is we can talk about functions with tables. Wow. Okay. Yes, with a table. So in the table, you might see something like, okay, so here's our table, and we'll do our best to kind of fit everything in. There's that. Kind of making the best, making do with what we can. Okay, so our table at the top, we'd have our domain, or x, and our range, or y. And we have all the different things, right? Mr. Dussold, and, oops, and sweet, if I can get the colors right, promise, sweet tea, right? Also Mrs. Dussold and sweet tea. Also Aaron and coffee. And I guess we've only really got room for one more, so we'll do mom, oops, and Dr. Pepper, right? So, Dr. Pepper. Okay. So then that's the table, right? That's the table way. And these are all three of these are representing the same thing. Now, the last way that we can represent a function is by using a graph. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit interesting. We'll just see kind of how it goes. But a graph, you might use a graph. And this is not, definitely I would say this is not the best way to represent this function. But you could have a graph like this where we've got, what if I went this way? So there's like my y-axis. Here's my x-axis. So you might see that as y and x. And now on my graph I have, well, y is my range. So I would have something like, you know, I'd have sweet tea, and I'd have coffee, and I'd have Dr. Pepper. And then down here, I'd have all my people, right? I'd have me, I'd have my wife, I'd have Aaron, I'd have mom, and I'd have Chris. Oops. Okay, so if we were to graph that, well, I really like sweet tea. So does my wife. Aaron likes coffee. And then my mom and Chris both like Dr. Pepper. It'd be easier to see with grid lines, but you can see, right, we're matching up sweet tea with me, my wife, coffee with Aaron, Dr. Pepper with my mom and Chris. So you can also represent functions using a graph. Okay, so that's functions and their different representations. Let me see if I can get all of this on one screen. There's functions and their different representations. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how to deal with domain and range and functions and how they're represented. If not, I have an example video that I will post using numbers, good old-fashioned numbers. Until then, I'll see you later.